Sarah Chen adjusted the strap of her equipment bag as she walked through the gates of Naval Special Warfare Training Center, the morning sun casting long shadows across the pristine facility. At 28, she had spent more hours behind a rifle scope than most people spent watching television, but today felt different. Today she was entering a world where her Olympic silver medal and national championship titles meant nothing if the men around her decided they meant nothing. The range master, Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez, met her at the Armory building with a firm handshake and knowing eyes. He had seen her resume, understood what she brought to this place. The same could not be said for the group of Navy SEALs jogging past in perfect formation, their eyes lingering on her with barely concealed amusement. "Sarah," Lieutenant Commander Morrison called out, his voice carrying that particular brand of military authority mixed with condescension. "You must be our new target girl. Hope you brought comfortable shoes because you will be doing a lot of walking back and forth to those paper targets today." The laughter from his team rippled across the morning air like stones thrown into still water. Sarah felt the familiar tightness in her chest that came with being underestimated, that burning sensation she had learned to channel into focus and precision. She nodded politely, knowing that words would only fuel their assumptions. As she unpacked her equipment, each tool placed with methodical care, Sarah could feel their eyes on her. To them she was just another civilian contractor, someone hired to do the mundane work so they could focus on the important business of becoming elite warriors. They had no idea that her hands had held rifles worth more than their annual salaries, that her trigger finger had broken records that still stood unmatched. "Where in the world are you watching from right now, and what time is it there?" Share with us in the comments because this story is about proving yourself no matter where you are or what others think of your abilities. The first week passed in a blur of condescending smiles and dismissive gestures. Sarah found herself relegated to the most basic tasks while the SEALs conducted their advanced marksmanship training. She changed paper targets, swept brass casings, and organized ammunition supplies while listening to their boastful conversations about kill shots and combat scenarios. Morrison seemed to take particular pleasure in treating her like furniture that happened to move. "Sarah," he would bark without looking in her direction, "we need fresh targets at the 200-yard line. Make sure they are centered properly this time." His emphasis on properly always drew chuckles from his team, as if precision was somehow beyond her capabilities. But Sarah watched everything. She observed their shooting stances, noting the subtle inconsistencies in their form. She listened to their breathing patterns, hearing the slight irregularities that would cost them accuracy under pressure. Most importantly, she studied their targets after each session, reading the story each bullet hole told about the shooter behind the trigger. The irony was not lost on her that these men, who prided themselves on attention to detail, had failed to notice the most important detail of all. They had not bothered to read her personnel file beyond the word civilian contractor. If they had, they might have seen the line that read Olympic silver medalist, precision rifle, or the notation about her world record in long-range accuracy that still stood unbroken 3 years later. Chief Rodriguez caught her eye during one particularly dismissive exchange, offering the slightest nod of understanding. He knew what they were missing, but Sarah understood that respect in this environment had to be earned through demonstration, not documentation. Have you ever been in a situation where people completely underestimated your abilities based on first impressions? Tell us about it because we all know that feeling of having hidden talents that others cannot see. The second week brought more complex training scenarios, and with them, more opportunities for Morrison to showcase his arrogance. Sarah found herself positioned behind the firing line during live exercises, tasked with recording scores and managing equipment while the SEALs demonstrated their skills at various distances. Today was different though. The exercise involved precision shots at 400 yards, a distance that separated good shooters from exceptional ones. Sarah watched as each SEAL took their position, adjusting their scopes and calculating wind drift with the methodical precision their training demanded. Morrison stepped up to the firing line with the confidence of a man who had never met a challenge he could not overcome. His first shot struck the target 2 inches left of center. Acceptable by military standards, but Sarah could see the slight tremor in his follow-throw that would prevent true precision. His second shot landed closer, but still outside the ring that marked expert marksmanship. "Wind is picking up from the southwest," Morrison announced to his team, as if atmospheric conditions were personally conspiring against him. "These civilian targets are probably not even properly calibrated." Sarah bit her tongue, knowing that she had personally installed and calibrated every target system on this range using equipment precise to within millimeters. She had also been tracking wind conditions since dawn, noting the subtle shifts that would affect bullet trajectory at extended distances. The other SEALs took their turns, each producing groups that would earn praise at most facilities but fell short of the standards Sarah had trained under for over a decade. She made careful notes of each performance, documenting not just scores but the technical elements that created those scores. As the morning progressed, Sarah noticed something else. The SEALs were beginning to glance in her direction more frequently, though not with the dismissive looks she had grown accustomed to. Something in their expressions suggested a growing curiosity about the quiet woman who seemed to notice everything while saying nothing. By the third week, the training scenarios had evolved into complex tactical exercises that tested not just marksmanship but decision-making under pressure. Sarah found herself assigned to operate the electronic target systems, controlling the appearance and movement of targets from a central console while the SEALs engaged in simulated combat scenarios. From her position in the range control tower, Sarah had a perfect view of every shooter and every shot. She watched Morrison's team navigate through a course designed to replicate urban combat conditions, where split-second timing and surgical precision meant the difference between mission success and civilian casualties. The exercise required shots at multiple distances while moving between positions under time pressure. Sarah operated the targets with mechanical precision, raising and lowering them according to the predetermined sequence while simultaneously tracking each participant's performance on her monitoring equipment. Morrison approached the final position, a shot that required him to engage a target at 600 yards while accounting for crosswind and elevation changes. Sarah watched through her spotting scope as he settled into position, his breathing slightly elevated from the physical exertion of the course. His shot missed the target entirely. The electronic sensors registered no impact, and Sarah was required to announce the miss over the communication system. "Target 6, no impact," she stated in the neutral tone her position demanded. Morrison's frustration was visible even from her elevated position. He cycled the bolt of his rifle aggressively and prepared for his second attempt. This shot struck the target but well outside the scoring rings, earning him a failing grade for this portion of the exercise. As Sarah lowered the targets and prepared to reset the course for the next shooter, she found herself calculating the exact corrections Morrison would have needed. The wind had shifted 3 degrees northeast, requiring a half-minute adjustment left. The temperature drop had affected bullet velocity, demanding a quarter-minute elevation increase. These were calculations she performed instinctively, the result of thousands of hours spent reading environmental conditions and their effects on precision shooting. The fourth week brought a distinguished visitor to the training facility. Admiral Harrison, a legend in naval special warfare, had arrived to observe the advanced training program and evaluate the readiness of Morrison's SEAL team. His presence elevated the stakes of every exercise, turning routine training into high-pressure demonstrations of elite capability. Sarah received orders to ensure the range operated flawlessly during the Admiral's visit. Every target system had to respond perfectly, every piece of equipment had to function without hesitation. She arrived 2 hours early, methodically checking each electronic target and verifying the accuracy of every measurement system. Morrison gathered his team for a briefing, his voice carrying across the morning air with unusual intensity. "Gentlemen, today we show the Admiral why we represent the finest fighting force on the planet. Every shot counts, every decision matters. We do not have room for mistakes." The Admiral took his position in the observation tower alongside Chief Rodriguez, his weathered face revealing nothing as he prepared to evaluate the team's performance. Sarah felt the weight of multiple expectations as she prepared to operate the target systems that would determine whether these men passed their critical assessment. The exercise began with standard engagements at known distances, progressing systematically toward the more challenging scenarios that would test the limits of their abilities. Sarah operated each target with mechanical precision, her movements economical and purposeful as she managed the complex sequence of electronic systems. As the morning progressed, she noticed something troubling in Morrison's performance. The pressure of performing under the Admiral's scrutiny was affecting his normally steady shooting. His groups were opening up, his timing was becoming inconsistent, and his confidence was beginning to crack under the weight of expectation. What challenges have you faced when trying to prove yourself under intense pressure and scrutiny? Sometimes our biggest tests come when the stakes are highest and everyone is watching. The afternoon brought the most challenging phase of the evaluation. Admiral Harrison had requested a demonstration of extreme long-range precision shooting at 800 yards, a distance that pushed even elite snipers to their absolute limits. The wind had picked up, creating complex crosscurrents that would challenge every aspect of the shooter's technical knowledge. Morrison approached the firing line with visible tension in his shoulders. Sarah watched from the control tower as he settled behind his rifle, taking longer than usual to establish his shooting position. The Admiral observed silently, his experienced eyes noting every detail of the SEAL commander's preparation. The first shot went wide, missing the target by nearly 2 feet. Morrison's jaw tightened as he cycled the bolt and prepared for his second attempt. This shot struck the target but landed in the outer rings, far from the precision zone that would demonstrate the surgical accuracy expected of elite operators. Sarah could see the mathematical problem from her elevated position. The wind was gusting at 15 miles per hour from the northwest, requiring a significant windage adjustment that Morrison had failed to calculate properly. Combined with the temperature differential between the heated rifle barrel and the cooler afternoon air, the ballistics had shifted beyond his current scope settings. Morrison fired his third and final shot, achieving only a marginal improvement. The Admiral made a note on his evaluation sheet, his expression revealing nothing but disappointment evident in the subtle shake of his head. From her position operating the target systems, Sarah found herself calculating the exact corrections needed for a perfect shot. The wind required 4 minutes of angle adjustment left, while the temperature and altitude demanded 2 minutes of elevation increase. These calculations flowed through her mind with the automaticity of breathing, the result of years spent mastering the complex mathematics of precision shooting. The Admiral turned to Chief Rodriguez and spoke quietly, but Sarah caught fragments of their conversation. "Standards," he said, and then disappointing performance, followed by something about reconsidering the team's readiness status. The remaining SEAL team members fared no better than their commander. Each shooter struggled with the complex environmental conditions, their shots scattered across the target face in patterns that spoke of technical deficiencies rather than bad luck. Sarah watched from the control tower as confidence drained from their faces with each missed opportunity. Admiral Harrison's patience was visibly wearing thin. He had traveled across the country to evaluate what he had been told was an exceptional team, only to witness a demonstration of mediocrity that fell far short of the standards he expected from elite operators. His conversations with Chief Rodriguez became more frequent and more pointed. Morrison's frustration reached a breaking point after his teammate's final miss. "This equipment must be malfunctioning," he declared loudly enough for everyone to hear, including the Admiral. "These targets are probably miscalibrated, and the wind readings have to be wrong. No SEAL team shoots this poorly under normal conditions." The accusation hung in the air like smoke from a misfired round. Sarah felt every eye turn toward her position in the control tower, where she had been operating the electronic systems with mechanical precision for the entire evaluation. Morrison was essentially blaming her for his team's poor performance, suggesting that her equipment management was responsible for their failures. Chief Rodriguez stepped forward with the diplomatic authority of a senior non-commissioned officer who had witnessed countless young officers blame their tools rather than examine their techniques. "Lieutenant Commander, the equipment has been tested and certified. Perhaps we should focus on the fundamentals rather than looking for external explanations." But Morrison was beyond rational discussion. He pointed directly at Sarah in the control tower, his voice carrying across the range with unmistakable accusation. "That civilian contractor has been running our targets all week. How do we know she even understands how to calibrate precision equipment properly? Have you ever been blamed for someone else's failures when you were actually doing your job perfectly?" Sometimes people look for scapegoats instead of looking in the mirror. Admiral Harrison's voice cut through the tension like a blade through silk. Lieutenant Commander Morrison, that is enough. His words carried the weight of decades in command and the unmistakable authority of someone who had seen real combat and knew the difference between excuses and execution. The Admiral descended from the observation tower with measured steps, his weathered face revealing the kind of controlled anger that comes from watching professionals make unprofessional accusations. He approached the firing line where Morrison stood, his rifle still in hand, defiance and desperation warring across his features. Chief Rodriguez followed closely behind, his expression grave. He had worked with Sarah for weeks and knew the meticulous care she took with every piece of equipment under her responsibility. More importantly, he had read her complete personnel file and understood exactly what Morrison was challenging. Admiral Harrison stopped directly in front of Morrison, close enough that their conversation would be heard by every person on the range. You are suggesting that this civilian contractor, who has been operating equipment with flawless precision for the duration of your training, is somehow responsible for your team's inability to hit targets at 800 yards. Morrison straightened his shoulders, clinging to his accusation like a life preserver. Sir, all I know is that our performance has been inconsistent, and the only variable has been civilian operation of the targeting systems. Perhaps we should verify the calibration before making final evaluations. Sarah felt her heart racing as she realized the conversation was moving toward a direct challenge of her competence. From her position in the control tower, she could see every face on the range turn toward the unfolding confrontation. The moment she had spent weeks avoiding was approaching with the inevitability of an incoming tide. Admiral Harrison nodded slowly, his strategic mind already calculating the most effective way to resolve this situation while maintaining the integrity of the evaluation process. Very well, Lieutenant Commander. Let us test your theory about equipment calibration. The Admiral's voice carried across the range with crystal clarity. Miss Chen, please join us on the firing line. We are going to conduct a calibration test to address Lieutenant Commander Morrison's concerns about equipment accuracy. Sarah felt every muscle in her body tense as she descended from the control tower. 4 weeks of careful anonymity were about to end in the most public way possible. She walked across the range with measured steps, acutely aware that 43 Navy SEALs, 1 Admiral, and assorted training personnel were watching her every movement. Chief Rodriguez met her halfway, his expression a mixture of anticipation and concern. He handed her a clipboard containing the technical specifications for every target system on the range, though they both knew she had memorized these details weeks ago. Morrison watched her approach with undisguised skepticism. Admiral, with respect, asking a civilian contractor to verify her own equipment calibration seems counterproductive. She obviously has a vested interest in claiming everything is working properly. Admiral Harrison raised his hand for silence. Miss Chen, I understand you have been responsible for all target system operations during this training cycle. In your professional opinion, are these systems accurately calibrated and functioning within specifications? Sarah's voice was steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. Yes, sir. All systems have been tested daily and are operating within manufacturer specifications. The electronic sensors are accurate to within 0.1 inches at all measured distances. Morrison scoffed audibly. That is exactly what I would expect her to say. The question is whether we can verify her claims through independent testing. Admiral Harrison studied Sarah with the calculating gaze of someone who had spent decades evaluating personnel under pressure. Miss Chen, would you be willing to demonstrate the accuracy of these systems through practical testing rather than theoretical specifications? The moment Sarah had been unconsciously preparing for since her first day at the facility had finally arrived. She nodded once, knowing that her answer would change everything about how these men saw her. Admiral Harrison gestured toward the rifle rack containing the precision weapons used for long-range training. Miss Chen, please select a rifle and demonstrate that the target at 800 yards is properly positioned and calibrated. A simple center mass hit will suffice to verify system accuracy. Sarah approached the weapon rack with the fluid movements of someone completely comfortable around firearms. She selected a standard-issue sniper rifle, the same model Morrison had been using, and began her inspection with the methodical precision that had been drilled into her through years of competitive training. Morrison crossed his arms and spoke loud enough for his team to hear. "This should be interesting. I doubt she has ever fired a rifle at distances beyond basic qualification ranges. 800 yards is not exactly civilian contractor territory." Sarah ignored the commentary as she checked the rifle's action and examined the scope settings. She made subtle adjustments to the parallax and verified the mounting torque, her movements betraying a familiarity with precision weapons that went far beyond basic training. Chief Rodriguez positioned himself with a spotting scope, preparing to call Sarah's shots and verify their impact on the target. The Admiral took his position behind her, close enough to observe her technique while maintaining a clear view of the target downrange. The entire range fell silent as Sarah assumed her shooting position. She settled behind the rifle with the natural ease of someone who had spent thousands of hours in exactly this position. Her breathing became controlled and rhythmic, her body language shifting into the focused intensity that separated casual shooters from serious marksmen. Morrison watched with skeptical amusement, already preparing his commentary for what he expected would be an embarrassing miss that would vindicate his accusations about equipment problems. Sarah closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the wind on her face and calculating the precise adjustments needed for the environmental conditions. When she opened them, her gaze held the absolute focus of someone about to demonstrate capabilities that would reshape everyone's understanding of what they had been witnessing. Think about a time when you had to prove yourself when everyone was watching and judging your every move. Those moments define us more than we ever expect them to. Sarah's finger found the trigger with the delicate touch of a surgeon making the first incision. Her breathing pattern shifted into the rhythm she had perfected through 10,000 hours of practice, each exhale bringing her closer to the natural respiratory pause where her shot would break. The crosswinds that had plagued Morrison and his team became nothing more than data points in Sarah's mental calculations. 15 miles per hour from the northwest, gusting to 18, requiring 4.2 minutes of left windage. Temperature 68 degrees, humidity 43%, barometric pressure falling, demanding 2.7 minutes of elevation adjustment. Chief Rodriguez peered through his spotting scope, ready to call the impact and provide feedback. Admiral Harrison watched with the intense focus of someone who understood that reputations and careers could be decided by the next few seconds. Morrison stood behind them with his arms crossed, his expression a mixture of skepticism and barely concealed anticipation of vindication. He had spent 4 weeks watching this quiet civilian woman perform menial tasks around his range, never imagining that she possessed capabilities that would challenge everything he thought he knew about marksmanship. Sarah's world narrowed to the precise alignment of crosshairs on target, the steady pressure of her cheek against the rifle stock, and the gradual squeeze of her trigger finger. Time seemed to slow as she entered the zone of absolute concentration that separated Olympic-level shooters from everyone else who simply aimed and hoped. The rifle fired with a sharp crack that echoed across the suddenly silent range. Through her scope, Sarah watched the bullet's trajectory with the confidence of someone who knew exactly where it would strike before her finger had even touched the trigger. Chief Rodriguez's voice cut through the silence with professional authority. "Center X ring, dead center. Perfect hit." A collective gasp rose from the assembled SEALs as they processed what they had just witnessed. Morrison's confident expression cracked like ice under sudden pressure, replaced by the dawning realization that he had catastrophically misjudged the woman he had been dismissing for nearly a month. The silence stretched for what felt like eternity before Admiral Harrison stepped forward, his weathered face breaking into the first smile anyone had seen from him all day. "Outstanding shot, Miss Chen. Would you mind sharing your background with Lieutenant Commander Morrison and his team?" Sarah stood and safed her rifle before turning to face the assembled SEALs. "My name is Sarah Chen. I hold the world record for precision rifle shooting at 1,000 yards, a record I set 3 years ago that still stands today. I won the Olympic silver medal in precision rifle competition, and I have been competing at the international level for 12 years. Morrison's face had gone completely pale. The woman he had spent 4 weeks treating like an incompetent civilian contractor was one of the most accomplished marksmen on the planet. His accusations about equipment calibration suddenly seemed not just wrong but professionally humiliating. Admiral Harrison's voice carried across the range with unmistakable authority. Miss Chen was hired specifically because of her expertise, not despite her civilian status. She has been observing your training, evaluating your techniques, and preparing recommendations for improvement based on her Olympic-level knowledge of precision shooting. Chief Rodriguez stepped forward with barely concealed satisfaction. Lieutenant Commander, Miss Chen has been taking detailed notes on every aspect of your team's performance. Her observations about breathing techniques, trigger control, and environmental compensation could improve your accuracy by 30% or more. The assembled SEALs looked at Sarah with completely transformed expressions. The quiet woman who had been changing their targets and managing their equipment was actually the person most qualified on the entire base to teach them about precision marksmanship. Morrison stepped forward, his voice heavy with the weight of 4 weeks of mistakes. Miss Chen, I owe you an apology. My behavior has been unprofessional and my assumptions were completely wrong. Sarah nodded graciously, understanding that respect in military culture had to be earned through demonstration rather than documentation. Admiral Harrison extended his hand in a gesture that sealed her acceptance into their community of elite warriors. Share this story with someone who needs to remember that everyone around us has hidden talents and abilities we might never expect. Sometimes the most extraordinary people are standing right next to us, waiting for the right moment to show us what they can really do.